Every gambler knows that the secret to surviving,
I don't wanna take advice from fools.
you always won every time you placed a bet.
That's what I want.
This is a modernized edition of a story scribed a decade or so ago, The Ultimate Guide to Being a Wise Guy for Not So Dummies. I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. But as technology and resources for intelligence evolve, it certainly warrants refreshing and modernizing. And here we are with the updated podcast for that. One of the most customary questions that I get is where do wise guys and sharp players get so much intel? Just as the only way to Carnegie Hall is practice, 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 the only way to win in sports handicapping is information, information, information. All you need to get down is data, and it's just to merely live, sleep, and breathe sports handicapping. Perhaps neglect the slumber advice. Siestas are not much of an option in sports soothsaying. An interminable supply of coffee is also an essential apparatus as well. Anyway, if you're still with me, are you ready to be a wise guy and a sharp bettor? Now, do handicappers and high rollers really have inside information? In reality, it depends on how strict your definition of quote-unquote inside information is. Didn't Bill Clinton utter something along those lines? Anyway, wise guys and the few authentic handicappers out there do have the time, wherewithal, and knowledge of where and how to bring to light useful information. To put it mildly, to win consistently, which very few do, takes a lot of time. We are the 1%ers. The internet is bar none the largest apparatus on the planet for obtaining peerless particulars. Funny, in the first edition of this thesis, when I wrote it, in the free scoreboard days, it was the very early days of the information superhighway. Now that declaration qualifies as beyond obvious that it's all about the internet. Hometown newspapers and in college, even the team's own SID sites are unbeatable for not so inside, but certainly not always known to the public facts. Sites that are catered towards the gambler as well as those accommodating to the general sports fan can be infinitely valuable as well. In fact, as we do specify, fantasy sports sites are among the best sites for the spectacular, as injury facts are indispensable to both gamblers and fantasy players. What is a person to do, though, for reports of the most obscure colleges? Well, it started with Google News, now infused into the main search engine. Almost every single newspaper, major newspaper anyway, is online, and a bonanza of locally generated information. You know, Fairfield is playing Iona. Sports bettor need just go to news.google.com and enter Fairfield, Iona. And Google can find any news stories from that day, searching even the small town scandal sheets. Furthermore, it is true with high-profile games and professional sports. Of course, one need to experiment when it comes to more generic terms like Arizona or Cincinnati by adding one of the team's nicknames, or a term like basketball can narrow the information to exactly what one wants. Between Google News and way back when, ESPN Insider, but now all the major sports sites have a paid portion. Well, most of them do anyway, but still, it can be a godsend when it comes to information. Now, since this article was first written, just simply going to Google is at times just as effective. Action Network is decent, but truthfully, I've been disappointed in the real meat and potatoes daily betting information they supply. It's mostly as a lead generation for their computer database Bet Labs and their odds service, which is good, but still inferior to Sports Database. SDQL truly is for next generation handicappers, and that's what I use, although I do have a lot of systems from Bet Labs as well. Oh my word, those who believe the poppycock that preseason football games are a mere crapshoot are truly missing out on the motherlode. Reading the team's stomping ground ledgers or gold mines for learning which teams are taking the exhibition most seriously, at least from a standpoint of a final score. It's very commonplace for coaches to flat out state they want to instill a winning habit in the preseason. This is, of course, truer with the fledgling coaches and the young and or traditionally losing franchises. Quarterback and key player rotations can be found with educated research. In other cases, a little reading will manifest that there are several teams just concerned with looking out for certain young players. It's not uncommon for one team to play its starters much longer than the other squad. We're still talking about preseason football, of course. Best of all, coaches announce it before the game. Those with limited time can get cliff notes just by reading the Associated Press stories found on, about 1 million sports sites. The AP stories are at their best in NFL preseason from a handicapping standpoint, though quality information can be had in other sports as well, particularly college football. Fantasy football sites continue to escalate the quality of NFLX coverage. Now, every now and then, I have even uncovered a treasure from the online student newspapers. While there's a select group of beat writers who I feel comfortable accepting what they say at face value, any potential gem that I get from the student papers must be verified. But then one would be surprised at the information that can come from the college media itself. Considering there's a lot of overlapping information with handicapping and fantasy sites are also great foundations, as I alluded to earlier. And to put it mildly, the fantasy sites like RotoWire, RotoWorld, etc. are no-brainer for the gambler in the NFL. Nobody comes close to not only giving football injuries, but also giving a fantastic analysis of how such will affect the teams and who the replacements are for injured players, key matchups, and the like. Now, Don Best's expensive service does the best job of real-time, late-breaking information. Originally, the problem with all the above sites was that the reader only got a player name and a status. But unless one knows the accurate scoop on every player on every team and their backups, often those injury sites are at best starting points. What good is Squid State guard pick a winner, questionable knee, when that is the sole information that's provided? Is pick a winner, and by the way, that's the hypothetical name of the player, is the point I'm trying to make. Is he the conference best player? Or is he a player on a team with no depth, or is he a part-time starter playing for a team whose strength is at his position? RotoWire does a very good job, originally in MLB, but now in all sports, at analyzing how the injury will specifically affect the team. In college sports, they, though, are imperfect, and they don't cover every injury from every team. But wise guys must research, and research. More times than not, the team's SID site will give very good information on the particulars of a player. Game started, important stats, and ditto on his replacement. The home ground fish wraps must be cross-referenced as well. Now, what are the particulars that I seek out? I cherish when I hear a player or a coach, or better yet, the players, that's plural, admitting they suffered a disheartening loss and have to follow it with another tough game. Such teams make great go-against plays, the so-called letdown theory. This is most true with college basketball and NBA teams that are not true top-shelf teams. For the latter, this is especially true if a team is playing back-to-back and are in the midst of a 5 games and 4 nights trip, which, of course, hasn't really happened quite as much since the latest CBA, but, 3 and 4 nights, etc. Now, fortunately, those words were initially penned about 2 decades ago. The aforesaid software programs enable me to store proven situations and tell me when they apply, so I'm not going to miss them. Few situations leap out at me more than in hoops when a team is on the wrong side in an 11-2 run to lose outright, of course, by a point or two. Then they have to play either the next night or maybe even the night after. This is most frequently in the NBA, but also occurs in the Ivy Leagues and West Coast Conference, which play back-to-back. Generally, the remaining conferences on the left coast include Pac-10 play, which is a Thursday and Saturday, so distressing losses are very important factors to track. Keep an eye on teams that play Saturday and Monday as well. Luckily, their software in some sports includes the biggest lead, or others the margin at the end of a quarter. So yes, we can monitor, for example, the teams that blew a 17-point lead in the NFL. How do they do? And how do teams do after overcoming a 17-point deficit? For the NBA, keep in mind that NBA.com, in conjunction with CBS Sports, will give a play-by-play rundown of the entire pro hoop game. There are, of course, glitches in their system, to be honest, but one can, for the most part, get a 100% accurate breakdown of how a game ended. And, of course, since I originally penned that a decade or so ago, most major sports sites really have such, in fact, now for all sports. This applies, but with different criteria in baseball, how much the bullpen was used, etc. But that's for a future article. Many sites give pitch-by-pitch breakdowns as provided by Stats Inc. In the NBA especially, it occurs more often than one thinks. I just get giddy when I read that a few players thought their upcoming opponent ran up the score or was shown up by a gratuitous windmill slam dunk or something to that effect. This is especially true if the team feels that they were shown up and, was on the road in reference game and now playing home in the game that we're handicapping. Yes, software can measure revenge situations. Now, also, certain beat writers, especially in the NFL and college football, can be outstanding giving accurate unit versus unit breakdowns. But wise guys have the experience to distinguish as to who the heck knows what they're talking about and who is blowing smoke. I regret Sporting News a few years ago was a must-visit for college football as they broke down literally every Division I game. However, they really reduced that feature and, budget cut and all that other stuff. But whatever, let's not live in the past, let's live in the future. As I've mentioned many times, one of the big keys to handicapping games is spotting deceptive final scores in handicapping and why teams really lost. That is why any true handicapper must own a satellite dish or a great cable TV sports package. I won't leave home without it. Well, I guess that's why I won't leave home. It's also invaluable as far as scouting mismatches in personnel matchups. Sophisticated software now enables me to see how a team does after winning a game in which they had 100 total fewer yards, for example. Sports gaming posting boards are good vehicles for gamblers to share information if one can actually sift and suffer through a lot of the garbage. In fact, to tell you the truth, some of the top SDQL systems I use did come from posting boards. In a perfect world, the best sites would not be moderated, but in places like the sports gambling news groups and sites, flaming takes precedence over content and forces valuable contributors to go to the referred sites. Now, much like distinguishing from among the good beat writers and the unfounded scribes, one must differentiate between the posting board's participants who provide quality info and those who are simply, of course, again, blowing smoke and cannot. Utilizing the best databases is essential to triumphant prognostication. There are many out there, both free and pay sites. Look, Covers.com has tremendous databases for all sports. With 10 to 16 game schedules for college football and the NFL we must also have stated the ability to look beyond the mere data, not ignoring, mind you, but an aberrational game here and there can dilute the statistical significance of football raw numbers. Well, there you go. There's some of the trade secrets. All you need to do is invest 35 hours a day, 10 days a week, 60 weeks a year. Or you can just follow us at offshoreinsiders.com, Joe Duffy's Picks, anchor of offshoreinsiders.com, the top sports handicapper in world history.